Welcome to NILA 2020 On Demand. This session was previously recorded for the NILA 2020 virtual conference. It is available to you through December 31st, 2020. Please note, once viewed, each on-demand program is eligible for 1 continuing education credit. Links to materials and presenter contact information have been archived in a Google folder and are made available after conference. Support files and documents can be found in session files below the program description. Any questions about the NILA 2020 virtual conference digital platform can be directed to Christina@nila.org, or you can call 800-252-6952. Academic librarianship as a second career is sponsored by ASLS. Without further ado, our presenters.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Giovanna Colosi. I'm an academic librarian at Syracuse University. I started my journey in librarianship about 10 years ago. I received my master's from Syracuse University in 2016. And in 2018, I started my career as an academic librarian. Prior to that, for about 20 years, I worked in higher education. Some things I did was work in admissions, residence life, and the most recent was academic counseling. My first master's degree was in counseling and human services, and I want to welcome all of you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda McCormick, and I am a senior assistant librarian at the University of Buffalo. I was hired at UB in the summer of 2019. I currently work as the liaison to the chemistry and physics departments, and I am also interim liaison to the departments of psychology and school social work. I hold an MLS degree from UB, a JD from UB, and my undergraduate degree is from Hobart William Smith, and it's a BS in biology. So how did a lawyer become a librarian? When I first started my professional career as an attorney, I had hoped to work in environmental law or with public service. But after earning my degree, I stayed in Buffalo, which made it a little bit more difficult to work in public service or environmental law. Because much of the legal work here is litigation-based or in private practice. So I practiced for a few years, and once we started a family, I transitioned over to a position in university development at UB. University development is basically fundraising for the university. It was interesting, and I was able to apply my research skills that I learned both in undergrad and as an attorney. But a lot of the researchers that I worked with in prospect research had their MLS degree. And I found myself getting re-interested in the position, which, of course, it was a lifelong love of mine, the love of libraries. And so I call it my midlife crisis degree. I went back to UB, got my MLS in 2014. I started my work in librarianship in the public libraries. And then I transitioned over to the academic world when a position opened up at UB. Thank you.
My name is Kim Plassche. I was hired as a senior assistant librarian at University at Buffalo last summer of 2019. I have my MLS from UB, and my undergraduate degree is in environmental studies and geography, also from UB. I've been working in libraries for about 17 years now. I started at the tender age of 16 as a part-time page at Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. Since then, I've held public librarian positions working reference and management in Buffalo, Niagara Falls, and Lackawanna, New York. I have also worked for about 4.5 years in a corporate library. I was a research librarian for a company that does consumer products testing. When I applied for my position at UB, I was the bookmobile manager at Buffalo and Erie County Public Library, and also working a part-time gig doing backup chat reference for dozens of libraries in the United States. If any attendees at NILA this year had the chance to go to NYLA in Rochester in 2018, you may have actually seen my bookmobile. I was very lucky enough to drive it down the 90 to Rochester and park it on the trade show floor there. My various jobs in public, corporate, and virtual libraries really helped me hone my reference, research, and reader's advisory skills. And I was able to demonstrate how this background would be a good fit as I transitioned to academic librarianship at UB. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Amanda, who is going to get us started talking about finding.
Okay, so I am just going to jump ahead into our first slide. So you've heard all of our stories. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about making the jump into the world of academia. And instead of talking about specific jobs that will transition easily into academic, let's talk about some of the skills that you already have, okay, from all of your previous work experience. We all had different backgrounds, and we were all able to make the jump. So let's take a look at yours. So if you've ever conducted a training session within your current position, you have teaching skills, you have instruction skills. You've planned the session, you've run the session, and I'm sure you've sought feedback for the session. This is all part of assessment and instruction. Have you ever run a story time? I ran story times when I was a public librarian, and let me tell you, there is nothing like singing in front of a room of strangers to make you feel like you are a true librarian. But in doing so, I learned all sorts of great things, right? So I was working on my communication skills. I had to plan the session. I had to target my audience, right? Sometimes I was talking to 3-year-olds, sometimes I was talking to 10-year-olds. And I had to learn the skill of time management. How could I fit the program into the time that we had scheduled for the program? Have you ever drafted a memorandum, a briefing, a product summary? If you've done so, you have writing skills, right? You know how to research, you know how to edit your words, you know how to write analytically or persuasively, and you might have written summaries for presentations. These are all skills that we're using currently in our academic librarianship jobs and skills that you could potentially have already learned in your current profession. So where do you start? I mean this literally, and I mean this figuratively. The first thing you really need to do is think about where you want to work. You really need to think about the geography of your job search. Otherwise, you are going to be overwhelmed with the number of websites and the number of positions out there. So let's pretend, right? Let's pretend we want to work in upstate New York. We'll use Buffalo and Rochester as our target area, and we are going to start making a list, right? So I would first recommend make a list of your target schools. In Buffalo and Rochester, we're super lucky. We have a lot of really great schools up here. You know, UB, SUNY, all the SUNYs, U of R, RIT, you know, I could go on and on. Make a list, check their job sites. Regionally, we have a couple of awesome and strong library resource councils that have job postings. Check their job postings. And then nationwide, if you decide to really expand your search, ALA, the Association of Research Libraries, and even a Google search will be a good place for you to go to start looking at these positions. Okay, I would recommend preparing a spreadsheet, maybe a checklist, so that you don't duplicate your efforts. It'll be a time management sort of thing for you at a certain point when you start reviewing these positions and applying for jobs. Okay, so you're looking at your job postings and all of a sudden words come up that you're really not familiar with. And one of these words that will keep coming up is tenure, right? So colleges and universities are going to use words like tenure. They're specific to the world of academia. So this describes the type of position that you will be applying for when you apply for the job, right? So the different libraries, different academic libraries, will have different appointment lines for their librarians. And it just depends really on the institution. There's a lot of different ways that people term it. It could be tenure track, it could be professional track, it could be a combination of both. This website that I have referenced on the slide is a great resource for taking a look at the different ways that academic appointments at libraries are described. I recommend you take a look at it when you get a chance. And, you know, given the current job market, I would not recommend that you limit your job search by a certain type of appointment, because you might be missing out on a great opportunity if you just say, I want tenure track, or I don't want to do any writing, so I'm going to go professional track. Don't do that. There's not going to be enough jobs out there, number one. And number two, you really need to get in the door and see what the job is like before you make that sort of decision. Okay, another word you're going to see over and over again is your CV. These academic positions do not want your resume, they want a CV. Let's take a look at the differences between the two. So the main difference between your CV and your resume is on the emphasis in what you've done, right? So there's certain accomplishments that are valued more in academia than they are in the professional world. The CV format will permit you to put those accomplishments first and foremost, as opposed to your resume. There's this great website that UC Davis put together about putting together your first CV. I really recommend that you take a look at this as well. When they say that they want a CV in a job posting, they really want it. Don't just send your resume. Show them that you understand the world of academia and that you have taken the time to prepare your CV, to show them what you can do and show them that you're really interested in the job and entering this profession. Okay, let's go on to our next slide. So this is the start of 3 slides that describe the current job that I'm sitting in. This is a real job posting, in other words. I wanted to show this to you so you could take a look at some of the language in this job posting with me and see how, even though it is an academic position, a lot of the skills that they reference within the description are skills that you are going to have. You are going to have these skills from your previous profession, right? So let's take a look at this first page. The first page is just a description of what you're going to be doing in the job. So you're going to be providing research support, developing partnerships, doing a little bit of outreach. Then we have more research support. Here's the instruction we were talking about. Consultation in person. You'll be communicating. We talked about this before as well. You'll be collaborating, which I'm sure you've done. You'll be assisting, okay? So all these words, all of these skills are what you can bring to the job and what you've most likely already done. So let's go to the next slide. So most universities will have minimum qualifications and preferred qualifications. You have to meet these qualifications. It's an automatic no if you don't, okay? So your job is to make sure in your application materials that you show the hiring committee that you meet these qualifications. You could do it overtly. You could literally list the qualifications that you have. You could do it within your cover letter. There's a couple of different ways you could approach this, but you have to make it clear, okay? Tell them you have your MLS. Tell them you have a strong commitment to diversity. Give an example, right? How are you keeping up to date with the trends in the field that you're applying for? It could be as simple as reading the literature, read the magazines, things like that. Maybe some of your continuing education courses could help with bibliometrics and altmetrics, enthusiasm, things like that. All right, let's go to the next one. Your preferred qualifications. If you have these, again, highlight them. Show them that you know what you're doing, right? Because of my background in law, I was able to demonstrate a knowledge of copyright, a knowledge of intellectual property. I made sure I told them about that because it kind of boosts your application a little bit to have these preferred qualifications. And again, you'll see you'll need your cover letter, a CV, and 3 references. Okay, so the best candidates when you're applying for this job, you need to make it easy for the hiring committee to hire you. Show them, like I said before, that your qualifications meet the job qualifications. You're going to submit all the required materials in the format that they request, and you're going to have very, very clean and proofread materials. You will need to notify your references, make sure they're all up to date, because they will be contacted. Kim and I were contacted and an interview was scheduled with them as well as with us. Joe actually had to not only submit her references, but she had to go through a background check. So all these things are going to start coming at you as you get prepared to submit. And just make sure you're ready, make sure it's clean, and please make sure it makes a persuasive case of why you're the best candidate for this job. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking and I am going to go ahead and pass this off. I'm going to mute my screen.
Okay, let's hope my connection stays on for now. I'm going to share mine. Okay. Okay, you know what? Sorry, I just want to make sure everybody could see this. It's hard with just the one screen here. Am I sharing? Let's see, let's try it again. There we go. All right. Okay, so now you've prepared your application materials, you sent them in, and you hear back. So they like you. At this point, it could be days, weeks, months since you've submitted those materials. So be sure to review them if you do get a call back for any sort of pre-screening or interview. You really want to have it fresh in your memory how you kind of entice them to give you that call back to begin with. Typically, first, before going in for an interview, there will be some sort of pre-screening. Many of us at this point, we are not surprised to have a phone interview before going in or doing a Zoom interview nowadays. But a lot of institutions actually do a written pre-screening as well. So you've already polished your CV and cover letter to highlight your transferable skills that Amanda mentioned. Be sure to review those and really think about how your experience in your past jobs qualifies you, hits those minimum and preferred qualifications. This is where you're going to really talk yourself up. So now I will talk about what you can expect with search committees, pre-screening, and initial interview prep. So when I applied at UB, I was very shocked to hear that there was a search committee of individuals working together to find the perfect candidate for the job that I applied for. In the past, at other jobs, I had been interviewed by a head of reference, a library director, or reference librarians, but never an entire group of people from different departments working together. The closest to a search committee I ever encountered was actually when I interviewed for my corporate library job, and that was still just 2 supervisors and some librarians that sat in that I would eventually be working with. Collaborating as a search committee at a university or a college is a very formal process. The individuals that are on the committee have been invited to serve, or volunteered because they have an interest in selecting somebody for the position that they want to work with. They also might work directly with the collection or subject or have some sort of interest in that area. Others may be on the search committee simply because they need a line on their CV showing that they have done service work for the university or the libraries, and that's okay too. They have many responsibilities on the search committee. They will be reviewing all of your application materials and then working with HR to set up pre-screening phone interviews and interview days. They may also be the ones contacting your references, or as Amanda mentioned, interviewing your references in a way. And eventually you will be spending a lot of time with these people if you are invited in for an interview. Many interviews consist of multiple days and many meals. So you will be going out to eat with them. You may be riding in their cars as you travel around the city, or if you are interviewing in another city or state, they may even pick you up at the airport. And they will escort you around campus on your interview day. So be sure that you feel very comfortable with everybody on the search committee, know their names, know their backgrounds, and just be able to hang out with them for long periods of time. So not so fast. You're not in yet for an interview. You will have some sort of pre-screening. There are interview type questions that are asked that are designed to help search committees slim down their pool of candidates. Perhaps they had a lot of amazing applicants and they really need to focus on a few people. So they will do this pre-screening to decide who will go to the next step. They all like what you conveyed in your CV and cover letter, but you may have missed some points with the minimum qualifications or preferred qualifications. So they really want you to expand on that. Many institutions will send you an email asking for written responses to questions before a phone interview. And this happened when I applied at UB. I was asked to answer 6 questions related to my experience, and I was given 1 week to email those responses back. I was given no guidelines for length or format. These specific questions did require a lot of background information. They were very long responses, and they were similar to something I expected to hear at an in-person job interview. If you are asked to answer any questions before an official interview, take advantage of this opportunity because you will be given some time to think about your answers and really shape your story in a way that you may not have on an interview call or in person. So there is a lot in the literature right now, and there has been for a while, about transitioning between library environments or transitioning to an academic library career from a different type of job. Tina Franks wrote an article in 2019 where she surveyed librarians that had shifted between types of libraries and asking them what their experiences were. We will include more quotes from her article later in the presentation, but for now, I do want to highlight this quote right here. This is very similar to other responses she received. Many articles that have interviewed librarians feel that they are not good candidates for an academic library job. They think that they have focused on different areas of librarianship and maybe haven't paid as much attention to writing or publishing or bibliometrics or research, anything like that. And this is simply not the case. And as Amanda highlighted earlier, you can transfer your skills and make yourself a good candidate. So as you did when you prepared your cover letter and CV, think about how you can really talk up these experiences you've had now. So memorize concrete examples for each of the minimum qualifications mentioned and really get creative about how you will express that your experience is good for this role. So you may have not written an article or a book, but you may have done technical writing. At my corporate library job, I did a lot of technical writing, and I had to meet a specific set of standards, much as you would for an academic article. You may have done newsletters for your patrons, or designed flyers, or done social media marketing. This is all writing, and really think about how you can translate this. As Amanda mentioned, you may have not done instruction. You may have not taught a class, but you may have done story time or planned a program for adults. There is a lot of work that goes into planning our programs and really executing them and having a successful program in public libraries. And we do all the same things you would do if you're asked to teach a class for a faculty member in the library at a college. So you would have to design the class, have a lesson plan. Okay, so you would do the same thing for a program. You're not going to start a program blindly. You will have a plan. Your programs themselves, you are teaching things. Even if it's making a craft, you are using your instruction skills for this. And finally, at many of our programs, we ask for an evaluation from parents or attendees for ideas to how we can improve our programming. And we do the same thing when we provide an instruction session to a class in the academic library. So think about some of your successful or maybe not so successful programs and how you can talk about those at your interviews. If you've done collection development, remember, think about the names of any vendors you've worked with or any collections specifically you've worked with. Dollar amounts, especially if you spent money on a collection related to a grant. These are all things that you really should talk up at the interview. And if you haven't worked in a library yet, you're coming from another career field, think about any purchasing decisions you've done. If you've done supply ordering or worked with vendors or contractors, be sure to talk about that. And then reference. We see a lot of different types of people in public libraries, and you're going to see a lot of those same people in an academic library. We have faculty and students that are from other countries, speak other languages. They're all age groups, and we see this in the public library. So think of specific examples where maybe you helped a public library patron that was an English language learner, or even if you conducted reference in another language, have those examples ready. Also, mention any reference that you've done virtually. Right now, it seems we're all doing chat librarianship. And if this is something you've done at a public library job, be sure to mention it at the academic library interview, because they probably are doing this as well. And if you aren't coming from another library job, be sure to talk about your customer service interactions with any type of customer at your current job, because those are really important skills to have, obviously, for reference. And don't forget your education. You may be interviewed at the same time that people coming right out of college, out of earning their MLS, are being interviewed for the same position. And they don't have the same real world experience that you do. So they certainly will be talking about examples from their education. So be sure, if you've worked on any big projects when you were in school, or done any courses related to the minimum qualifications, mention those. Also, if you're interviewing for a subject specialist or liaison job, you don't necessarily need to have a chemistry degree to be a chemistry librarian. But if some of the courses you took in college, they were advanced science courses, look at a list of those. Have a list ready to talk about everything that you did and how you can relate that to the subject that you will be working with. It might put you just one step ahead of the person who has an English degree and did the bare minimum when it came to science. So if the search committee wants to interview after they reviewed those answers that you answered in the email, if you needed to, they will now ask you for a phone interview. And so at this point, hopefully you are very prepared. The phone interview will take place with some of the search committee members, the entire committee, or somebody from HR. And there have been instances of people being given the questions before the phone interview. If that happens to you, you're very lucky, but don't count on it. Prepare for this as though it is an in-person interview. And this is your last shot before a face-to-face interview, so definitely make it count. You have made it this far. They obviously like something about you, or else they wouldn't be asking you to participate in this step. So really give it your all. If you happen to be scheduled to work at your current job the day of the interview, consider taking the day off, or at least have a nice long hour lunch break where you can really devote the time and attention to this that it needs. Don't take the call in the staff lounge at your current job or your office, because then you'll just be worried that somebody will overhear or you will be interrupted. I actually did my phone interview for UB in my car in a parking lot in downtown Buffalo outside my work. And I made it to where I am today. So you just got to do it where you can. And nobody was going to interrupt me in my car. So if you do have the luxury of interviewing at home, that is great. But just make sure that you take all the same steps you would at home. So, or if you're out at work. So be sure you have great phone reception wherever you're going to do the call, that your phone battery is fully charged. Heck, if you have access to a landline, use that. And also, just think about what you're going to wear. If you do a simple Google search for phone interview tips, one of the biggest tips is to dress professionally. And you may think this is silly, they can't see me, but there is some evidence that if you dress to impress, you will feel more confident, you will project your voice, and really be in the right frame of mind that you need to be for this. Along those same lines, some bloggers recommend standing up for the call because you can project more clearly. It's kind of like that advice some of us have seen to kind of stand in superwoman pose with your hands on your hips before you go into a big meeting. It's the same sort of thinking with that. But whatever you do, whatever you wear, wherever you do the call, be sure to prepare your own questions before you do it. As cliche as it sounds, you are interviewing them as well. And if you just have questions that you ask at the phone interview and you decide that maybe this isn't the right fit for you, you can potentially avoid all of the time and frustration that goes into preparing a presentation for an interview day and really going through all the steps of those interviews. Another advantage of asking questions now is you have a chance to ask uncomfortable questions about salary, benefits, and the work culture without being face-to-face. So you have a little bit more freedom when it comes to that. So that is all for phone interviews. I'm going to pass this off to Giovanna, sorry. Let me see, stop share.
Great, thank you. Start sharing my screen here in a second. Okay, so you've finally made it to your interview day. And if you are new to university settings, college settings, academia, when you get the schedule for the interview, you might be a little shocked at what you see. So this is just one slide of 2 slides of what my interview day looked like. I was interviewing locally, so my day started at 8 a.m. But if you are flying in or driving into a different city or different state, your interview might actually start the evening before with a dinner with the search committee. But mine started that morning at 8 o'clock. And typically the first person you'll meet is someone from HR. With me, they went over some just general HR things. We had talked earlier about tenure, and SU doesn't do tenure. They are not faculty track, but we are staff track, professional track. So she talked a little bit about what that would entail. And a little bit later, I'll discuss that further. In the morning, I also met with the person who would become my supervisor. They typically are not part of the search committee. The search committee might consist of people outside of your department as well as people in the department, but typically not your direct supervisor. After that, I did meet with the search committee and they asked, general questions. Throughout your interview day, since it is a long day, you will get intermittent breaks. Typically they'll have you put your coat, your bags, umbrellas, things like that in a space for you. And they will give you intermittent breaks because it is a long day and you are talking a lot. Part of an academic position typically comes with a presentation that you have to deliver. Along with that, you'll be eating lunch, perhaps another dinner. And I always tell when I work with my student workers and they're going into librarianship that you are being interviewed at every step of this process. So even when you're at lunch or dinner, you will be asked questions, maybe not as formal, but always be on your best behavior. Depending on what position you're going for, you might be meeting with different departments in the library. My position is a subject specialist for the School of Education at Syracuse University. So part of my job is instruction, part of my job is collection development, and part of my job, and a big chunk of my job, is research and reference. So for my interview, I did meet with all three of those departments because I'd be working with them in some capacity. So depending on what role you're going for, you probably will also meet with those departments. Hence why it's such a long day, because when you're an academic librarian, your skills really reach over a lot of different departments. And people in those departments want to meet you and meet all the candidates to see if you're a good fit. So the day continues. You'll also probably get an opportunity to meet with the library director or the library dean, depending on the university and its structure. This is a great time to see what the vision and the mission of the library is. They usually want to tell you what that is. And then you can also decide if that fits with your own professional goals. Once again, you'll see there's another break. This is where I met then with the instruction librarians. Like I mentioned, I'm part of the instruction team now, so I did get to meet with them. And at the end, sometimes you'll wrap up by meeting again with the search committee, maybe again with an HR professional, and perhaps even with the person who would become your supervisor. At the end, you will probably get a campus tour. And then you'll either go back to your hotel, airport, or you'll go home. During the interview, I always like to carry a notebook or something with me, along with copies of my CV. In the notebook, I've typically jotted down some questions ahead of time of what I want to ask at the end of the day, but also keep that notebook just in case things pop up during the day that you want to ask later on. And sometimes depending who you're meeting with, it might not be appropriate to ask that group, but maybe you'd want to ask your supervisor at the end or someone in HR. So always carry something that you can jot down your notes. I like to carry copies of my CV. Sometimes they have them, sometimes they don't, but it's also nice for you to have so you can refer back to some things on there that you might have forgotten. Typically, you're going to be nervous, so just having something there that you can refer back to also really helps. So what kind of questions are they going to ask? So we talked earlier about those pre-screening questions. And some of those will be reiterated throughout the interview. And since you're interviewing with so many different people, don't be afraid of saying the same answer over and over again, because people will ask very similar questions. As part of my preparation, I try to give an answer in 2 or 3 different ways so it doesn't sound so scripted and canned. So that is something that you can definitely do during your prep. But typically you're going to get your general questions. So questions that you've probably encountered before, no matter what job you've gone to. So, what are your strengths and weaknesses? What's your ideal work environment? What type of supervisor do you work best with? They might ask you to talk about a project that you've led. So some very general questions that you'd probably hear at any interview. Then you're going to hear about your job specific questions. So for me, when I interviewed, I was interviewing for the subject specialty librarian in education. So I got a lot of questions regarding pedagogy, new educational practices, things like that, as well as what my background was in instruction, what my background was in collection development, and what my background was in reference and research. And as we mentioned several times before, even though I didn't have direct experience in a lot of those areas, I prepped and made sure that I had an answer for each one of those questions. Because although I hadn't really done reference or research in a library sense, other than a couple internships, I was a counselor for many years. So I know how to talk to people. I know how to get to the bottom of a question or a concern on a personal level. And so that's a transferable skill that I could do that now on an academic level. Out of left field questions. So you might have, heard some of these weird questions that your friends have told you, or maybe you've encountered as well. And these questions aren't there to really trip you up, but they want to see if you can think quickly on your feet, and sometimes even if you have a sense of humor. So for my job, I was asked, if you were a type of ice cream, what type of ice cream flavor would you be? And I said pistachio because it's kind of nutty, and people who like pistachio really love it. And then others think it's kind of and everyone kind of laughed and thought that was funny. It's not going to be a make or break question, but just be on your toes for those types of things. And like I mentioned earlier, prepare the questions that you have for them in advance. Kim mentioned you're also interviewing them. You want to make sure that you're a good fit for the team. So having questions prepared in advance is something that you need to do. And they're going to expect that you have questions for them. So definitely do research on their website, really take a look at what their mission is, what their vision is. If you want to go really in depth with questions specific to the job, this is where you need to ask those questions. Like I mentioned, refer back to your notepad in case you have other questions that have come up that you've jotted down. Syracuse University now, the libraries will send a list of the questions that the search committee will ask in advance so you can prepare. We've done that for ADA compliance, really. So, but like I mentioned, that's not going to be standard for every university. But if they do give you those questions in advance, really take the time and do some research. And I think that'll really help you. But as always, there will be questions that pop up just from normal conversation that are not going to be pre-written. Okay, so what's the worst that can happen? So, we've all had horror stories. I think, Kim talked to me about one time, there was a fire drill or something and they had to evacuate the building during an interview. For my interview, one of the search committee members really was asking me questions about a specific portion of librarianship that I had not encountered. And instead of, trying to twist it or trying to find a way to make me sound really intelligent, like I knew what I was talking about, I just told her I wasn't really sure. I didn't know the answer to her question. And she sort of kept drilling me about it. And finally, the honesty thing, I think really helped out because I said, I really don't know, but I'm really smart and I can learn really quickly. And I said, probably, I think you'd be a great person to learn from. So I sort of turned it around. I used honesty, grace, humor, and, my smarts to get out of it. But I was really, really sort of upset about it because I thought I had absolutely blown the interview because I did not know the answer to that question. But afterwards, after I was hired, people told me they actually liked my answer, that I wasn't trying to spin it, that I was just honest, that I didn't know the answer, but I definitely could learn. And so if that comes up in your interview, just always, answer it as gracefully as possible, always with a smile on your face, and don't let it bring you down for the rest of the interview. Okay, so I think most people, when they get their first initial day long schedule, you get nervous about the presentation. So I came from higher ed, so I was used to giving presentations. And maybe in your job, you give presentations, but not formally. Story times are presentations in a way. Customer service, you're behind a desk. You need to present yourself in a way that people can understand you and be engaging. So you can take all these things and wrap it up into a formal academic presentation. So I was given a choice of 3 topics for my presentation, and I chose one that I felt most comfortable with, and I researched it. So what you can do is personalize it to make it something that you want to talk about. I put pictures of me when I was younger in a library because I've always loved librarianship and I thought libraries was cool. So I found an old picture of me. I put that up there. This is where you can talk about your past experiences and how it relates to librarianship if you haven't had a chance to yet, during those question and answer times. So this is a good place to put it. Do your research. So research the topic, research the school. They're asking you to present on a topic for a reason. So they want to make sure that you're an expert. So maybe you weren't an expert when you got the topic, but they're going to give you enough time to do your research. So make sure you do it. I tell my students, don't just stand behind a podium. If you have a mic that you can walk around, be dynamic, make it interactive. I had someone who did an interview and they handed out cards to people with questions on there. And so when there was a lag in conversation, he would say, hey, you have a card, you have a question, what's your question? So it was more like a conversation other than, just somebody standing there lecturing to you. So that was different and interesting. And lastly, make it understandable. So typically anybody is welcome to come to these presentations. So it's not just the search committee members. It's typically anybody in the library, from student workers, sometimes patrons will even come in, all the way to the dean. So you want to make what you're talking about really understandable. So avoid library jargon. You might know what it means, but a lot of other people do not. Don't dumb it down, but just make it relatable. Make it something interesting that it'll captivate the audience's attention, but also not bore them if they don't understand what you're talking about. So what to wear? I think if you go into any library today, you'll see lots of different things like nose piercings and tattoos. I have one. People dress down, people dress up. But for your interview, it's always better to err on the side of conservative and professional. Once you get hired, you can sort of see what the culture is. And depending on what type of work you do, if you're in the stacks, you might dress one way. If you're on reference desk, you might dress another way. But for the interview, always dress, for success. So I would say err on the side of conservative, polished. Dress comfortably. So I do a sit down, stand up, walk test. So you don't want to wear something too tight or constricting that when you sit down, you're uncomfortable. You don't want to wear something that you're always tugging at and pulling at. You want the clothes to represent yourself, but not something to impede when you're talking. you want to wear appropriate footwear. So I didn't do this one time. Every college campus inevitably is on a hill, on a mountain, something. So you want to make sure that when you're going on that walking tour, that you're wearing appropriate footwear. I'm a lover of heels. I wore heels one time. It did not work out well. So especially if you're here in New York, especially upstate New York, where Kim, Amanda, and I are, it snows. So make sure you have outerwear that's appropriate. If you need gloves, hat, make sure you have all those things, because inevitably you are going to be usually taking a tour. Bring an umbrella, anything that you'll need. And like I said, typically they'll have a place for you to store all that stuff, so you don't have to tote it around all day. Okay, so the day is over, or the day and a half is over. What do you do next? So you want to make sure that you're contacting your references again, just to let them know that they might be getting a phone call or an email. In academia, things typically run a little bit slower than industry. So sometimes it takes time by the time you're applying for your job to the time that you're hired. I applied for my job in January and started the job in July. So there was a big time span. So if you're contacting your references back in January, they might forget. So you want to give them a courtesy call to let them know that somebody might be contacting you. Like Kim mentioned earlier, I was subject to a background check, part of the HR process. Sometimes this also slows down that time where you get an offer. And when you have that notepad earlier, jot down names and email addresses of the people that interviewed you, or ask for business cards, because this is when you want to send a nice thank you email to those people. Sometimes that might be the make or break. They might not hear from candidate A, they might hear from you. And it's nice always to get a thank you. Make it personal if you can, but keep it straight to the point. You're not, begging for a job. You're just reiterating your strengths and skills, and maybe putting a little tidbit in there of what happened during the interview. So it makes you stand out and makes you memorable to them. So I want to talk a little bit about Syracuse University's permanent status and promotion process. So say, yeah, you got the job, or you're trying to, look at different jobs and weigh them. So we do not have tenure. We are not faculty track. So we are more of a professional staff member. But that doesn't mean that we still don't have to do certain things to get promoted and to receive permanent status at the university. So some of the things that we have to do are obtain references. So these are written letters of reference. And depending on the rank you're going for, you're going to have different numbers of references that you need. You also need to create a portfolio. Part of the portfolio is your current CV. It's also a personal statement. So going in depth on that CV, talking about maybe the presentations that you've done, working with patrons, your reference materials that you have. For Syracuse University, and this is a big difference, you do not need to publish to get to the first couple levels of promotion. Once you get further up, you do need to publish and do research, but you don't have to for the first couple steps. So if you're somebody that's, hesitant about that, this is a good starting point. But I will say our mentorship for the promotion process is wonderful. So librarians who have gone through the process before you will mentor you through it. We'll have Q&As. We'll share materials. We'll share past portfolios of people who have gone through the process and excelled at it. We'll share the portfolios with each other. So, and I think you'll find this in academic librarianship. It's not competitive. We're all there to help each other and make each other look good. So that's one thing I really liked about academic librarianship, is that there is a lot of opportunity for mentorship, a lot of opportunity to lift each other up. So without further ado, I will pass it over now so you can hear a little bit about Buffalo's tenure process.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so as Joe mentioned, academic librarianship, also at UB, we really do want to raise each other up and see each of us be successful. And this is definitely true at UB as well. They are very transparent about the entire process there. It is a little bit different than at Syracuse because we are faculty tenure track librarians. Not all of us are, Amanda and I are, but some of us are also on professional lines. The way ours, at least for Amanda and I, we get 2 reappointments and then a final decision for tenure, and it is all a 7-year process. So for each reappointment, you do have to prepare your dossier, what at Syracuse, Joe called it a portfolio. So all of this is explained to us at the interview. There is an entire hour-long meeting devoted just to this topic. And in addition to that, at the interviews throughout the day, different colleagues, potential colleagues ask if you feel comfortable with the entire process, if you have any ideas for research, if you feel that you are able to take this on. Each time you go up, you do have to prepare that dossier, and it is very similar to what Joe mentioned for the portfolios at Syracuse. There is a up-to-date polished CV, and we actually have 2 personal statements. We have one statement that is about our research interests and accomplishments, so our research statement, and then our service statement. And in the service statement, we talk about the different committees we've served on and all our volunteer positions and any sort of participation that we've had with professional associations. We rewrite those each time. We are actually assigned what is called a dossier preparer, and this is a tenured librarian that has gone through it before, and that librarian will look at all of your materials and compile them, and then kind of state your case at meetings later on why that librarian thinks that you should be reappointed or tenured. In addition to that dossier preparer, we also get 2 official mentors. Again, people that have gone through this process, we are paired up with, and they help you along the way. Everybody else helps you. People offer to look at your statements and offer ideas for collaboration, and it really is a great culture to work in, and you feel prepared. Now, unlike SU, if you do not get recommended for reappointment or tenure, you cannot stay on. I think Joe mentioned in the past that, you don't have to go on to the point where you publish, but at UB you do. It is expected. And if you don't publish by the end of it, you probably will not be tenured. And that is not likely to happen because, again, you have such a great support system. So each time there are a few meetings that take place. Your direct colleagues, people kind of at the same level as you, will meet for what's called a unit vote and discussion. And in addition to really singing your praises and saying if they think you should be reappointed, they will also give you some feedback on your dossier. They will say, well, she hasn't published yet. This is really something that she should focus on. And you are not present at those meetings, but your dossier preparer is and will report back all of that to you. Then there is the appointment, promotion, and tenure committee that is made up of tenured librarians. And if you've made it past the unit vote, now they will meet and talk about if you should be reappointed or tenured. If it is that last tenure meeting, that tenure step, it doesn't stop there. The final step is the recommendation for tenure or not tenure will go up to the university president's office. And we're told it might sit there for a little while, but eventually the president will sign off on whether you will be a tenured faculty member or not. I Forgot to mention in our dossier, aside from the CV and those statements, we also include letters of support. These are letters that are written by our colleagues, faculty members, and even people that we've worked with on different professional committees. And these are really, again, to elaborate what you talk about in your CV and say why they think that you are a fit librarian to be reappointed or tenured. And I think that's all that I have. Oh, just something to keep in mind too. Anything that you do now as you're looking for positions, that will be on your CV, not only when you apply, but when you go up for reappointment or permanent status or tenure. So if you kind of feel like there aren't any postings right now that intrigue you, but you want to get working towards this goal of being an academic librarian, work on committees, get more involved with your professional associations. Think of ideas for research, maybe even publish. Again, all of this will stay on your CV and you will be a great candidate for both hiring and reappointment and tenure. So going back to the Tina Franks article, we just want you to know it isn't all doom and gloom like that first quote seemed to convey. Many of the librarians in her survey did acknowledge that working in a variety of library environments or other careers even really prepared them to be a more versatile, a better librarian in general. And when they were preparing to make that shift, they sought out opportunities at their current jobs and really challenged themselves to make themselves a better candidate. These are some excellent articles and websites we really think you should take a look at as you prepare for this and to really get you excited for applying for and becoming an academic librarian. So that is all from us, and I think we'll pass it back to Becky now.
Thank you so much, everyone. This concludes the NILA 2020 On-Demand Program, Academic Librarianship as a Second Career. We hope you continue to take advantage of all the on-demand and live programs the NILA 2020 Annual Virtual Conference has to offer. Thank you so much for helping us make this the best virtual conference ever.